then urban and regional planning, and then down to urban design. Also, I found some new books, new references. Let's see here. I actually found Space, Time, and Architecture by S. Gideon. I'll try to summarize its contents, but just from the table of like contents, you can see what Siegfried Gideon is talking about here. So let's see here. New space conception, perspective, and urbanism. This is from the Renaissance, the Renaissance way of thinking. So as we saw in Srosvinda, that the star-shaped city is really a favorite city form for Renaissance architects. And then you have here Leonardo da Vinci and the dawn of regional planning. So as far back as the 1500s, regional planning was already around. I also have a copy of Vitruvius's 10 books of architecture if you want it, if anybody wants it. And then just recently, finally available online is the Planning and Urban Design Standards. So this is a more practical approach. My previous time, we really focused on the artistic aesthetic side of urban design, which is this book. But finally, we can sort of include this book urban design in case dili mo work ang internet. But anyway, highlighting it all the way from Vitruvius down to 2015 of Philippine planning history. We'll just do a quick discussion on this. And for those who were under me last sem, this will just be a reminder for you guys. So let's say that we're looking at 1700s map, urban design pretty much established in the developed countries in terms of like studying Roman architecture, applying principles of symmetry and what they call this, the aesthetics of the Roman civilization. And now we're just entering the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So we already have like going towards factory making cars. I erroneously said it was like invented in 1800s, but it's actually 1900s. So I was like 100 years off on that. I forgot. I forgot. Sorry. So some very important points to note here. Philippines, as we know, part of Spain. Over here, we have Manila as the capital. We have Spain over here next to France, Italy, and Germany, Hungary, and Vienna. So these are where the big players of the architecture, urban planning, and urban design world were sort of creating their theories and practicing them. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, we had our like Aboriginal Filipinos, no sort of what they call this. There is some sort of planning, but not planning in the way we practice it today. So we really didn't become like quote unquote a city until we were colonized. Although it would be fair to say that the Philippine cities existed, just not contemporary or modern cities. And because the popular form of development during this time, like 1500s, 1700s, 1800s, was the grid plan. Of course, Cebu City and the rest of the Philippines followed a grid plan sort of development. So over here was the first settlement in Cebu City. I'm focusing on Cebu City. And notice how small it is compared to how big Cebu City will eventually grow today. So some elements of the grid plan that is always consistent. This was again originated from Rome, sort of copied, I guess, for lack of a better term, by Spain. You have the churches, the plaza, and the schools in the city square. This is a typical Philippine plaza over here, based on the laws of the Indies. And then this is probably the oldest preserved and well-preserved city or like settlement in the Philippines, Intramuros. This is in Manila. And then I have like a quote here from the Laws of the Indies itself, from Wiki actually. Still don't have a physical copy of that. I don't know why we don't have a physical copy or like a digital copy, I mean. So, having made the selection of the site where the town is to be built, it must, as already stated, be in an elevated and healthy location with means of fortification, fertile soil, and with plenty of land for farming and pasturage. It needs to have fuel, timber, and resources, fresh water, a native population, ease of transport, access and exit, open to the north wind, and if on the coast, due consideration should be paid to the quality of the harbor and that the sea does not lie to the south or west, and if possible, not near lagoons or marshes which poisonous animals and polluted air and water breed. So let's take a look at the satellite image of Intramuros. Up here is the sort of drawing or proposal plan where you have the entrance. I think the entrance should be here on the right side. But if you look at it orient north upwards, you notice that Intramuros follows these conditions almost or basically perfectly. So Intramuros is pretty much elevated, and probably during that the time it was made in the 1800s or like middle 1800s, it had fertile soil with plenty of land farming, etc. One thing we can note over here is that the section says here, if on the coast, due consideration should be paid to the quality of the harbor, and that the sea does not lie to the south. Notice, like in the satellite image, Pasig River, or the body of water, is located on the northern side, and the sea or port area over here is located on the western side. I'm still not sure what are the negative impacts of having the sea on the southern side. It could have something to do with what do you call this? Ventilation or defense. I'm still not 100% sure why they don't want their cities or their fortifications having bodies of water on the south side. I'm still not 100% sure on that. But this is really a proof that Intramuros was built using standards, and these standards can be seen in the laws of the Indies. And some other examples here: Washington D.C.'s Lafont Plan, and then you see the grid is like sort of further developed with these like diagonal axes, and then each of the intersections of of the diagonal axes is a special public space like building or park, etc. And then this can be sort of seen during the American occupation after we were ceded to America when Spain lost to America in the, what do you call this? Spain-American conflict, and I would say 1898 or like a bit earlier, 1890s. And then because of the events of the Industrial Revolution, we have the car and also the train. The train actually got invented, I think I'm not super 100% sure on this, around like 1800s. So we have the train already. And then unfortunately, we lost our train station, our train tracks in Cebu because of World War II. And then just a quick note over here on the Garden Cities of Tomorrow. This was happening in the European countries to address the growing population and pollution of urban cities and towns. So the idea was to spread out urban development so that each city would have access to a garden, and then that would alleviate the overcrowding and the pollution. So they have like space for waste management and space for people to relax. But this wasn't a problem in 1900 Cebu because we had our population was not as high as Manila, and we still had a lot of open spaces, not just for relaxation but also agriculture. And then this is the Burnham plan of Manila. Notice the what do you call this? The capital or like the main civic buildings highlighted by diagonal sort of roads and then intersecting into like a main point. We saw this earlier in Baguio City. And then he attempted this in Cebu City, specifically in the capital area, where you have one long axis that goes through the Fuente Osmeña Circle all the way down to the older district of Colon. And there were supposed to be like radiating roads near the capital area, near Guadalupe. But it didn't really push through because of World War II. And then Philippine independence happened. Like we requested for independence, we or like we fought for independence. I think also we lost to the Americans, but after World War II, we were given our quote unquote independence. I say quote unquote because we're still pretty much an American colony even after World War II. Even the way we're speaking now is evidence that we are very much influenced by the Americans. We're speaking in English, US English, and not UK English. And this is a map of Cebu in 1944, near the end of World War II. And if I zoom in a bit more here, if it will allow me, let's zoom in a bit more here. You can clearly see Burnham's influence on the capital of Cebu City. Let's see. Come on. Yeah, something like that. I'll just move it manually. You have Fuente Osmeña Circle here. Notice the road is considerably smaller compared to today. And you notice like Capitol building is very much kanang prominent because there are no other buildings in the area. And then this is an example of the damage of World War II. This is in Manila, 1945, basically leveled the whole town. And this is where modernism, our like 1970s architects came in to repair, rebuild the damage of like World War II. One of the biggest figures there is Le Corbusier, and then his vision of the, what they call this, the radiant city, if I remember correctly. He envisioned high-rise office buildings surrounded by low-rise or like low to mid-rise residential housing to open up streets for more green spaces. And of course, it didn't pan out because it was too much of a what they call a utopian design, or it focused too much on the idea that build it and they will come. So build the buildings first and populate it later. They didn't do a lot of like public participation activities, really thinking and talking to the people who live in this area what they want. It was really more about a vision of one man imposing his own rules and goals on a group of people, and that's why it didn't push through, thankfully. Then over here on the right hand side, you have an image of what Magellan's Cross looked like before and during the 1970s. It had cars going through it, jeeps going through it. I think it's a lot better now that it's like pedestrianized, so it's a proper plaza, a proper public space. And then one of the champions or like well-known champions of public space in America during the 1960s was Jane Jacobs. She fought to protect public parks, old districts, heritage districts from highway development. So the idea was during this time, the car is becoming more and more popular. Transportation planners and urban planners agreed that the car is the way of the future during this time. And now we know that they were wrong. So it was a good thing that even during the 1960s, some people realized that we should preserve our public parks and public spaces. And then this is something really challenging in Cebu City and the Philippines because most people would say that the car, public transportation, and like private transportation is really the only way to move around our cities. And that's very unfortunate because we're already starting to feel the effects of needing the car too much. We have traffic congestion. We say road widening is a solution, but it's it's a very short-sighted solution to the traffic problem. The real solution would be, as evidenced by Jane Jacobs and her contemporaries in the 1950s America, also in the UK, it's really just providing more transportation options, more walking, more cycling, and really reduce the reliance on private transportation. Because just by the design of the car itself, like a normal car can fit 4 people, but the size of a car takes up a very large chunk of the road. And basically, you can fit 4 cars, or maybe, no, not 4 cars, 4 bicycles, or maybe 5 bicycles in the same space you would fit 4 cars. You're not creating greenhouse gas emissions. You're traveling at a lesser speed, so there's like lesser chance for accidents. But that's something that we have to like discuss further as we go along. And now we're in like 2005 Cebu City, where urban planning and urban design has been neglected. We had a plan in the 1970s, which was good up until the 1990s, and then it hasn't been renewed. And I think the latest version we have is the just a bunch of roadmap studies, conceptual studies, specifically the one done by JICA, JICA, under Metro Cebu. And then, of course, the green loop, championed by the Espinas, proposing like a circular loop or like passageway connecting Mandaue City, Cebu City, and Lapu-Lapu City. But that's still very much in the works. I think what component of the green loop is the third bridge, so we can see some progress on that. So really, this is really the importance of urban design and urban planning. Not much work has been done since the 70s. So now we're trying to catch up and recuperate or restore the public space or the importance of public space in our local communities, not just Cebu City, but also your own cities wherever you're from. So that leads me to our assignment over here. Do I have it here? I think I'll just like write it over here. Dutch. Okay, new slide. It's already 3:11. We didn't really get to talk about standards of urban design yet, but we'll do that on Friday together with this assignment. Hmm. Maybe like 3 days is not enough. Maybe we can move it to. Anyway, I'll just announce the assignment and then we'll decide on the deadline probably for next week, so you can get started. So assignment. Okay. How is my internet connection? Is it still working? I'll stop recording here.